The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Well, welcome one and all to another episode of this exciting show. It's exciting because, well, it reveals itself as we go. This is called Walking Through the Language of the Heart with our good friend Chris S. And that's exactly what we're doing. This if you've never joined us before, this is a book of that same name, Walking Through the Language of the Heart, which includes Bill W.'s Grapevine writings from 1944 to 1970 in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever they are listening to you, Chris. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Monty?
So you are a busy man. I'm a busy man, but we take time off on Thursdays to record this, and then we post it either late Thursday night or Friday morning. And we've been just having a whole heck of a lot of fun with this. This is episode 27. And I'm looking at the book, and we are just about exactly a quarter of the way through.
Yes, tonight we're gonna turn the page to page 100 out of 400. So I always figured there'd be about 120 shows that it would take to go through this book.
Right.
But I'm having fun, and I hope there's some people out there that enjoy listening to it as well.
So what are we doing this week?
All right, we're all the way up to October 1944. That means World War II wasn't even over. That's how long ago this was. So we're up to October 1944, A Date with Destiny. Now, I have no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So let's jump in and let's find out. Someone once said, as much as you may grow, as many recoveries as there may be, I think the eventual byproducts of AA will be greater than AA itself. Everywhere now we hear such remarks. They come from all kinds of people. Doctors think of applying our methods to other neurotics. Clergy wonder if our humble example may now vitalize their congregations. Business people find we make good personal managers. They glimpse a new industrial democracy. Educators see power in our non-controversial way of presenting the truth, and our friends wistfully say, we wish we were alcoholics. We need AA too. There really was a period of time. There was a period of time where they were getting incredibly good press, and the membership wasn't really that big. I mean, compared to today, where there's millions, it was relatively a small fellowship at that time, but they were getting great press and they were making great friends. And I think I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Bill Wilson was inspired by a man named Frank Buchman, who started the Oxford Group, right? And Frank Buchman believed in converting people who would convert people. So what Bookman would do is he would go after politicians. He would go after billionaires. He would go right to the top and try to convert them believing that tons more people would be converted than if he was just, walking around the street trying to convert people. And Bill was a little that way too. When Bill needed money, he went to the Rockefellers. When he needed press, he went to Reader's Digest. He thought big, and a lot of that, I think, paid off because there were some real serious heavy hitters who were advocates of Alcoholics Anonymous in the early days.
Wow.
So let's see here. What else is he saying? Why these stirrings? They must all mean, I am sure, that we have suddenly become much more than recovered alcoholics. There's that word recovered, Monty.
Yep, there it is.
AA members only. Society has begun to hope that we are going to utilize in every walk of life that miraculous experience of our returning almost overnight from the fearsome land of nowhere. His writing is so picturesque at times. It's certainly dated in the verbiage, but he could paint a picture, couldn't he?
Yes.
All right. Yes, we are again citizens of the world. It is a distraught world, very tired, very uncertain. It has worshipped its own self-sufficiency, and that has failed. We AAs are a people who once did that very thing. That philosophy failed us too. So perhaps here and there, our example of recovery can help. As individuals, we have a responsibility, maybe a double responsibility. It may be that we have a date with destiny. That was a very interesting paragraph. One of Bill's main points in spiritual growth was self-sufficiency has failed you. That comes up more and more and more many times in his writings. And you and I were talking about Dr. Alan Berger before we started the show. Mm-hmm. And he has done some incredibly important work with some of Bill's writings, mainly emotional sobriety. And in that, Bill points to that as our real problem. We still believe and we still engage in self-sufficiency, even though it's failed us 400 million times. So he's talking about that here. Philosophy failed us too. Philosophy failed me. I read all the I read so much stuff when I was my early days of drinking. I read everything you could read, and understanding a lot of the philosophical concepts was not enough for me to actualize it in my life. I could understand it intellectually, and then I could go out and get a DUI. You know what I mean, Monty?
Yeah.
So that's really it's interesting. We have a responsibility, maybe a double responsibility, as alcoholics. He's saying, but I love the personal philosophy that became so embedded in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really think sprang out of this man's mind. The more of these articles we read, the more I believe that. What are your thoughts on it, Monty?
So what I'm thinking about here is when we were talking about all these wonderful things that we've read in self-help books and mentors and spiritual advisors in our life and everything, not being sufficient. I mean, I don't care how many Tony Robbins seminars you're going to. If you are a real alcoholic, that is not going to be sufficient to keep you sober. We know that stuff. But I think we have a real hard time being convinced that obsession doesn't conform to reason. I mean, how many times have we heard people say over and over again, I have a family now. I cannot afford to drink again. So therefore, I will not drink again. And the very next day, they're stepping over their mother's grave to get another pint, because obsession doesn't conform to reason. I don't care how dedicated and how committed you are. If you're leaning on your own intellect to keep you sober, it isn't going to work. Bill understood that. I still think we have a hard time, really grasping that sometimes. We talked about this last week about how, out of one side of our mouth, we say we're powerless, and the other side of our mouth, we're trying to solve our problems with our own thinking. And we think somehow we can do this thing without the Creator. And the rooms are filled with people that are trying to do that. And they either fall away, or they just keep coming through the doors with the same old story. And we keep loving on them, and we keep teaching what we teach. Some of them get it, and some of them don't.
That is really well said, and I totally agree with that. So it says here, as an example, not long ago, Dr. E.M. Jelnick of Yale University came to us. He said, Yale, as you know, is sponsoring a program of public education on alcoholism, entirely non-controversial in character. We need the cooperation of many AAs to proceed on any education project concerning alcoholism. Without the goodwill, experience, and help of AA members, it would be unthinkable. So when the National Committee for Education on Alcoholism, now the National Council on Alcoholism, was formed, an AA member was made its executive director, Monty'man, one of our oldest and finest. As a member of AA, she is just as much interested in us as before. AA is still her avocation, but as an officer of the Yale-sponsored National Committee, she is also interested in educating the general public on alcoholism. Her AA training has wonderfully fitted her for this post in a different field. Public education on alcoholism is to be her vocation. This is very interesting for a number of reasons for me, Monty. One of them is I'm familiar with some of Dr. Jelnick's work. You might even be familiar with the Jelnick curve.
Yes.
So what he did was he put a curve together, and the curve was basically the progression of alcoholism, and you could plot on a graph certain things about alcoholism. Now I'm all for information like that, but if you think deeper and deeper education about alcoholism is going to help recover alcoholics, I'm going to have to beg to differ with you, because you could have shown me any curve in the world. Oh, Chris, you're on a downward spiral here. You're heading for the, get out of here. Quit bothering me. Yeah, my problem is not lack of understanding and knowledge. My problem is lack of power.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The self-sufficiency has failed me. Okay, so I've dealt with, it's the Yale School of Alcohol Studies, now it's the Rutgers School of Alcohol Studies. I've dealt with a lot of people at those places, and with C4 and Cape Cod Symposium and all that. I've met them, and they're wonderful people, and I'm all for that education, but just don't think that education is gonna help alcoholics. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's gonna allow non-alcoholics to understand alcoholism, maybe, but recovery is spiritual. It has to be. You know what I mean? Now, you might be a heavy drinker, and you might be able to read a book on, hey, how I quit drinking, without AA, and you might be a heavy drinker or a potential alcoholic, and that might work for you. But speaking to the low bottom real alcoholic, the way it's described in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the scale that those drinkers have gone to, you're going to need a spiritual experience. The other thing that is really interesting in here is Monty'man starting the National Council on Alcoholism. Now, as you've known, Monty, for the last 13 years, I've been a board member of the largest chapter of the National Council
Mm-hmm.
on alcoholism and drug dependence. She started it, and it's been huge. It's had its heyday. It recently went bankrupt, the national office, because it got involved with some people it shouldn't have, and what was left were the state chapters, and the largest state chapter, by far, was the New Jersey chapter, and that's what I've been a board member of. And just recently, I was part of a small team of people who were on the board who made a decision to rebrand and change the name. Now it's been, Marty Mann started it, but it's not the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence anymore. It is morphed into a much different entity, and it does more different things. It does a lot of advocacy. It does a lot of work with recovery. It does a lot of helping people without means find treatment. There's all these different things that it does. So we came up with a change in the name of the organization, and just this last year, 2022, it's changed from NCADD, National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. It's changed to the National Center for Advocacy and Recovery, NCAR. So what we're about is we're more about advocacy, and we're more about recovery than we are about education and fighting stigma and all the things that really didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting stigma didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Education really has its place in academia, but that didn't help anybody. But advocacy for better drug laws, for better treatment of alcoholics and drug addicts who have problems, to help them navigate to an effective treatment program, to work with the politicians as best we can to influence these policies. That's really what NCADD morphed into, and they do a million other things, right? So this paragraph is interesting. This is the history of the National Council with Marty Mann and Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob were brief board members on it. But it's, it may have some small chapters here and there left, but it's pretty much gone. And, it's matured, and it's evolved into, at least in New Jersey, into what I think it can best serve people like you and me. So I just kind of wanted to share that because I had some personal experience with it.
So I wanted to share too. I was thinking about all this education stuff. I remember back when I was in middle school in California, we called it junior high. They call it junior high out there where you are, or they call it middle school?
So they called it middle school until about 40 years ago, and then started calling it junior high.
So I'm
sorry, I had that backwards. Yeah.
So I was very involved as a youth, actually into early adulthood in the Boy Scouts of America. I was involved as a very young scouter, and got my Eagle Scout and Vigil Honor in the Order of the Arrow, and on, just worked my way up. And then as an adult was on boards, and I was a chaplain for a Scout Council for a number of years. And there was a thing called Operation Reach, and it was sponsored by the Boy Scouts of America, and it was an educational process on what certain drugs looks like, the dangers of certain places where you might buy them. I mean, it was almost, unbeknownst to us at the time, it was almost an informational program on how to obtain illicit drugs and make sure you got what you really were shopping for. You know what I mean? I mean, these fold open
Oh, wow.
display things that we would go to schools and it would have samples of, methamphetamine. Well, back then it was crank. They have samples of crank and crosstops and marijuana and what pipes look like and all that stuff. And we were all excited because we were going to solve the drug problem by educating these young kids on what, if you find this stuff, just like if you find a gun, run and get an adult, right? Let me tell you, that thing was a disaster. I mean, it was horrible. And we saw a lot of increase in illicit drug use amongst, our friends in school when that thing came out. It was terrible. And then there was a lot of different law enforcement agencies that came out with different programs, right? There was the DARE program. There was some good elements about that. But I always, Valiant was another one. I was always amazed at some of the lectures they would give. They would unfold these huge display things and show these kids what some of them they had never seen before. Well, now they know. And so I got mixed feelings about that. I think education's fine, but it's like you see a news report on TV about a bomber and they're telling you how to make the bomb. It makes no sense.
So my personal experience and my personal opinion and what I have observed kind of gives me a perspective on all that. I'm part of another organization that gets a lot of grant funding, right? And I'm in the recovery part of that organization. That's where I advise. They're about putting community centers together and things like that for the recovery community. That's where I advise. But a lot of their grants are for prevention. Okay. Now, they asked me one time, well, Chris, what do you think of prevention? And I'm like, well, for one thing, I don't believe one bit that any of it works. And even if it did work, you couldn't crunch the data. You couldn't follow the outcome data. Every once in a while, someone might say, well, I went to a Scared Straight program and I've never picked up. That would be like one person in 50 million. So I think that look, a lot of non-alcoholics, a lot of rich people. What would you rather give your money to? The drug addicts on the street, or to programs that teach kids, not to smoke marijuana? So all the money is going to this useless, program to teach kids not to smoke marijuana. And after they watch the video, they all want to try it now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's this misguided huge amount of money that goes to prevention every year, and I'm just not interested in how the ox got in the ditch. I'm very interested in how to help the ox get out of the ditch. Yeah. And that's just me. What are you going to do? I could be wrong, Monty, and sometimes I'm opinionated and people take exception to my perspective, and that's legal in America. But that's really how I feel.
I've been referred to as, in fact, it's in the intro to some of our other shows, as the over-opinionated 12-stepologist. And let me tell you something, brother, I have no problem owning that.
Look, hopefully recovery has made me open-minded to at least a certain extent. So if there was opposing evidence that seemed rational to me, I'm totally cool with changing my opinion. I'm not going to lock in and fight to the death just because it's my opinion. It may be wrong, but it's mine. I'm open to information and evidence. I just never see it where it concerns prevention.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I've seen the opposite. So anyway, here we go. Could an AA do such a job? At first, Marty herself wondered. She asked her friends, will I be regarded as a professional? Her friends replied, Had you come to us, Marty, proposing to be a therapist to sell straight AA to alcoholics at at so much a customer, we certainly we should certainly have branded that as professionalism. So would everybody else. But the National Committee for Education on Alcoholism is quite another matter. You will be taking your natural abilities and AA experience into a very different field. We don't see how that can affect your amateur status with us. Suppose you were to become a social worker, a personnel officer, the manager of a state farm for alcoholics, or even a minister of the gospel. Who could possibly say those activities would make you a professional AA? None, of course. And here's the funny thing that is not being said in this article that's part of our history is that, yes, Monty'man started the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. It turned into NCADD, and she was all in on it, right? Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob became board members, as would have made a lot of sense, right? I mean, I wouldn't have opposed that. A lot of people in the fellowship freaked out, and they were both kind of pushed into resigning from the NCADD. So that's probably after this particular writing here, but that's kind of what happened. They went on. Yet we do hope that AA as a whole will never deviate from its sole purpose of helping other alcoholics. As an organization, we should express no opinions save on the recovery of problem drinkers. That very sound national policy has kept us out of much useless trouble already, and will surely forestall untold complications in the future. Though AA as a whole, they continued, should never have but one objective, we believe just as strongly that for the individual, there should be no limitations whatever except his own conscience. He should have the complete right to choose his own opinions and outside activities, if these are good. AAs everywhere will approve. Just so, Marty, do we think it will be in your case? While Yale is your actual sponsor, we feel sure that you are going to have the warm personal support of thousands of AAs wherever you go. We shall all be thinking how much better a break this new generation of potential alcoholic kids will have because of your work. How much it might have meant to us had our own mothers and fathers really understood alcoholism. And, that may be true. One thing I have seen, a bit of evidence I have seen is if it's a family that's strewn with alcoholism. There's just everybody that's born into the family seems to be an alcoholic. If the patriarchs and matriarchs of that particular family get sober and start to develop really good long-term sobriety, a lot of times the children end up getting sober. A lot of times, a lot of the family members get sober. Sometimes not all of them, but it's conducive to have somebody in the house who's in recovery. If you're an alcoholic, it's conducive for you to find the path. You have a better chance of finding the path. Now, where he's saying the education of the effects of alcohol on the body, or whatever Yale was doing with the studies of the rats, the 100 rats to drink bourbon, 100 rats to drink vodka, and they'd see who what the heck happens here. That's all well and fine, and it makes great science papers and dissertations. I want to help the ox get out of the ditch. I want to concentrate on the things that will really work for the person who's already in trouble. Because I've learned I can't stop somebody from getting in trouble. And I can't stop somebody from drinking. But if somebody really wants to quit drinking, there's things that I can do that are very helpful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this brings up a thought. The philosophy of the rat park experiment that we've heard of, where they say It started out a few
Yes.
years ago, and the videos were like, everything you've heard about addiction is a lie. And then they told you about these rats that grew up in a healthy environment versus rats that grew up with other rats that were addicted and all that, proving that it's your environment that either creates a person who is, addicted or tends to lean towards addiction. And I scratched my head at that because I know so many people who grew up in environments that were incredibly healthy, and the support of parents, and just to prove once again perhaps the genetic component of alcoholism, and to prove once again you can have a wonderful environment, but if you're an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic, and it isn't going to be because you were raised on the toilet backwards. What do you think?
I believe that there can be some causation to alcoholism because of family of origin, but I think that's a much smaller piece of the puzzle than the genetic bullet is. I'm really the only alcoholic that was in my family. Brothers, sisters. You have to go way into like great uncles to
Mm-hmm.
find people that abused alcohol in my family. Now, there are people who I'll give you, for instance, the family of my first wife, mother and father. Father had an alcohol problem. Mother was a stone alcoholic. The three brothers became alcoholic
Mm-hmm.
and tried to manage that alcoholism with drugs and everything else until it basically took them out. The three girls never became alcoholic. They did a little tiny bit of drinking, but it wasn't their thing. So the genetic bullet can be maybe your risk of catching that bullet can be increased by having a family with a lot of alcoholism. I believe that, but I don't believe a lot of the other things that they try to pin alcoholism on. They try to pin it on shame. They try to pin it on trauma. They try to pin it on all these things that I'm sorry. I'm unconvinced,
Mm.
and I'm unconvinced because I've been around so many people in recovery. A lot of times these are people that work in treatment centers, and they're not around people in recovery. These people are being treated.
Yeah.
They're 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 is they're years away from recovery, when they're sitting in a treatment center. So they might have a different perspective about what the heck is going on. Another thing I see professionals doing or not doing that really gets me is this. The differentiation, the scale, a true assessment of all right, if you have cancer, in 5 minutes they can tell you it's stage 4. In 5 minutes they can tell you it's stage 2. Well, there is stage 1, 2, 3, 4 alcoholism. All right,
Mm-hmm.
it's measured by, the scale is measured by lack of control in drink. How much lack of control in drink have you lost? Are you the type of person who drinks 5 minutes after you leave a 90-day treatment center?
Right.
Are you the person that the doctor told you yesterday, if you ever drink again, you're going to be dead in 30 days, and you go right to the liquor store? Are you one of those guys? Or are you a disco drunk? Somebody that just goes out and gets drunk every once in a while and gets into a little bit of trouble. Well, those are different cases. You know what I mean? There's like stage 1 and stage 4. No one has ever put a differentiation process into the treatment process for alcoholics. So you get the same recovery program as a stage 4 when you go to a treatment center as a stage 1 would. No, it's not cookie cutter. They don't do that with cancer. They don't give a stage 1 cancer patient the treatment of a stage 4, or a stage 4 patient the treatment of a stage 1. But in treatment, it's just let's all just group all the drug addicts and the alcoholics. Let's put them all in room and give them our program. Uncle Wally put this program together. Give them our program. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There needs to be more outcome based, client driven, outcome informed treatment processes where you can follow the data in real time, so the treatment program that you're offering can be adjusted based on how well it is succeeding with the individual being treated, like you would do with a cancer patient.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm just, that's and I've been involved with so many treatment centers. There's good ones, there's bad ones, there's great people in the field, there's shysters in the field, like anything else, right? But the field itself as medicine, as like real treatment, is Civil War era stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm serious about that. So operating outside of these treatment programs is the 12-step recovery fellowships. And that they're one size fits all in that you are welcome here. And then it's an individual recovery experience for every single person, and that seems to be what's working. So, I told you, I go to different treatment symposiums and things, and I think I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. I went out to the West Coast Symposium on Addictive Disorders about 4 years ago. And they have a 7:00 in the morning 12-step meeting. And I'd never gone to it before. I'd been out there plenty of times. I just never got up that early. Well, this one time I said, I'm going to a meeting. And I walk into that meeting, and there is a circle of chairs that is larger than a full basketball court. And I am telling you, if a bomb would have gone off in that room, probably 50 treatment CEOs you would have lost in one blast. The people who run these large, huge treatment businesses, billion-dollar treatment businesses, guess where they were? It's just, this is the stuff that works.
So let me share this with you, and
let's see,
Chris, let me share this with you. So, this is my concern about. I don't think, my opinion here is, I don't truly believe that you can effectively address the solution to alcoholism by merely looking at the medical side of it any more than you can by merely looking at the spiritual side of it. I think it has to be addressed on both levels. And I think that programs that only look at it one-sided, I think they're doing people an injustice. And there are secular programs out there that are doing amazing work. They're very successful, particularly with people that are alcohol abusers and truly aren't alcoholic. That's great. That's wonderful. There are faith-based programs. I've been involved in one that everything is about a relationship with God, but they're missing the boat when it comes to the co-occurring mental health issues and some of the stuff that's driving the alcoholic. It is like a one size fits all. Just get your relationship with God, and everything else will work out. And you can come back later if you want to, but that's because you've probably failed somewhere. You know what I mean? And it's like, no. I'm concerned about people that are seeking after residential programs as well as outpatient that don't do a deep dive into these programs to find out if they're covering both sides of the fence.
I agree with you. I believe that it even says, in the doctor's opinion, the body is sickened as well as the mind. It is a deep issue. Um, and I believe that there's a lot of good that some of these
Sure.
treatment centers do. I think the best good that they can do is to prepare somebody for a life of recovery, to prepare someone to go out and get involved in the things that are going to promote a healthy recovery. And my experience in a treatment center, it was early 1989. I went to this place, and as far as treatment, it was terrible. It had this was back before you even needed any kind of clinical licensure or anything, right? It was like almost volunteers running groups, and I had one-on-one with an alcoholism counselor in my first 28 days, one, and all the rest was called group. And what you would do is you would sit in a group and you would just share. You just talk about whatever you needed to talk about, just dump.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, someone that was completely untrained, in this type of a thing, some Bob Newhart kind of a person who would say, "Oh, could you tell me how that made you feel?" And that was the treatment process. But the one thing that they did good was they started to bring in 12-step recovery meetings, and they started to take us out to 12-step recovery meetings, and they started to share with us the message that this is a lifetime thing. This isn't like getting your tonsils out. You're going to be in the hospital for 3 days, and then you're going to mend for a month, and then this won't be a problem anymore. This is going to be a problem. And we did get that message, but the treatment that I went through when I was in that place was almost malpractice. Now there are places that have studied for 100 years the best possible processes to put in place, and they move people around and put them in different groups. They don't treat everybody the same. There's different stages, and there's different processes in the program. All that is about self-examination, and all that is about discovery, and some of it is even revelatory for some of the people. Some of it is even deeply experiential. But my personal experience is recovery is a lifetime thing. I've had to pay attention to this for 30 plus years now, and put time into it. I believe to be able to survive the case of alcoholism I have. I've got a really bad case.
Sure.
So I think we have one more paragraph here.
Yep.
Let me finish that off. Personally, I feel that Marty's friends have advised her wisely, that they have clearly distinguished between the limited scope of AA as a whole and the broad horizon of the individual AA acting on his own responsibility, that they have probably drawn a correct line between what we would regard as professional and amateur. And Bill really is giving people permission in this article to, if you want to have a vocation that revolves around alcoholism or drug addiction, you want to be a counselor, you want to start a halfway house, you want to write a book on recovery, you want to do any of this stuff, right? Just don't, remember to follow the traditions. Remember, in the press, radio, TV, and film, not to share that you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous if they use your last name in your face, and to not sell Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step work for money. Those really are the guardrails, and have fun. Have fun going down the road. He really does give us some permission.
Something came up the other day, and I had posted this statement: members of a 12-step fellowship ought never personally charge money for taking others through the 12 steps. To do so would be a blatant disregard for our spiritual principles. The response I got was people were shocked that anyone would ever do that. They're like, well, that doesn't happen, right? I mean, nobody's doing that, right? And I know of a few people that are doing that, and they are.
I know quite a few people that are doing it too.
Yeah, they themselves are members of the very fellowship that they're making money off of using the spiritual disciplines in that fellowship, right? And I'm just now, and then one guy wrote me back. He goes, I'm a certified recovery mentor. I said, listen, I'm a board certified recovery mentor in the state of Oregon. I've got these letters I can put next to my name now, and I could, but you know what? None of that, it means a hill of beans. That's some, valuable training that I have, but I'm never going to use anything like that to sell what was given to me for free. I just can't, I can't wrap any kind of ethics around that. I just can't. Yeah. So I thought I'd mention that.
Bill says we must never. That's how. So he says we must never. So what does must mean?
Must means
and what
must.
does never mean?
Never means never. Yeah.
He's very, very clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I got a question for you, Chris, and this is just totally unrelated, but one of our listeners texted me yesterday and said, did you know that New York right now is voting on whether to basically outlaw, whatever that means, closed meetings, and all meetings must become open? And I never heard of that. I said, listen, let your heart not be troubled. I said, individual groups are going to do what individual groups are going to do. New York office has no control over what an individual group wants to stay at a closed meeting. They'll stay at a closed meeting. I said, it's okay. Breathe, calm down. It'll be fine. But have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, get me started on New York, and you're going to get some bad press. But anything is possible there.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, anything that I disagree with within the structure of Alcoholics Anonymous starts in New York. Okay, anything I disagree with, that's where it starts. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And until they move the major headquarters of Alcoholics Anonymous the hell out of New York City, I think we're going to continue to have a lot of controversy and a lot of foolishness going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There should be a rotating, general service location because there's just, the New York people have just kind of, with their perspective, not understanding, the rest of the states in the United States have started to, do this and that and the other thing. And people in Iowa are like, what? I really think there needs to be more of more of a collaborative geographic approach to, the central law, the general service. I do. And until they do something like that, you're every year you're going to hear New York is doing what? That's just going to be the way it is.
That's funny. Well, I'll tell you what, anybody that says that being involved in a 12-step fellowship is going to be boring and dull, all they're doing is coming to meetings. That's all they're doing, and they're not getting involved. Because once you get involved, there is no room for boredom. It's exciting. It's frustrating. It's enjoyable. It's enlightening. It's everything. Everything you can imagine you're going to get if you jump in with both feet, and it has been well worth it. Just well worth it. I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, my friend, next week, letter to the mother of an alcoholic. So that will be something that we'll be talking about.
Oh, that'll be good.
Yeah. So, friends.
Absolutely.
If you want to email Chris or I, just simply email us at take12radio@comcast.net. And that wraps it up for another episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart, Chris.
All right, Monty.
All righty.
I had fun.
Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Montyman, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof.